So today I'm going to talk about something which a lot of people are talking about, at least in the Middle East, and I'm pretty sure in other parts of the world, in terms of how to take the family from a close family business into an IPO. And I'm not going to talk about the methods of doing an IPO. There are many people who can talk about that aspect. I want to address this issue to the families that are looking at doing an IPO. Because I don't think a majority of families understand what it means to raise external capital, either by selling down or by increasing your capital through an initial public offering. There are many things that you do as a family when you're closed. You can interact with one another and get away with it. Here, for example, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, a family has a private jet. And today, the chairman's wife wants to use it. Tomorrow, another board director's son or daughter wants to use it. And because it's a family and they're all family members, maybe they have a roster of who uses what and how much, etc. And they can all utilize the thing. Great. No problem. Tomorrow, you're a family business. You're a family business that's gone public. And one of your assets of the business, even if you sell one share as a public company, then you're accounted. All the rules and regulations of a public listed company would apply to you. And let's say that one share is sold to a very annoying person who goes through every detail. And at the AGM, he gets the annual annual report. And in the annual report, it talks about what you call it, that the jet was utilized for business. And he has, or she has, information that that's not the case. The chairman's wife used it to go shopping. Now, he can correctly argue that, excuse me, this is an asset of the company. This is not an asset of the chairman. This is not the chairman's plaything. This is an asset of the company. Even though 99% or whatever the case is, are all in agreement that that's acceptable, he does have a legitimate right, an argument. You're abusing your position. While it's closed, family members can talk to one another and can come to an agreement. But when it's a third party, he will say, hey, I gave you my money and you have a fiduciary duty and a custodial duty to take care of my money. If you abuse that, I'm going to hold you accountable. Now, accountability depends on the regulatory body that's there. Some regulatory bodies are very stringent and will ensure whether you hold one share or a billion shares, you're going to be held to the same standard. And others are very lax, where they say, hey, you know what? We know the family. This guy's a troublemaker. Well, we're going to side with the family over the troublemaker and do nothing. That's the jurisdiction issue. How it's being handled, that's up to the jurisdiction. Does it want to be seen as a very world-class, high-standard regulatory body? Then it should apply it irrespective of who the other party is. If, on the other hand, it wants to be a very easygoing, happy-go-lucky, local, friendly, I'm running out of expressions here, boys club, then fine, that you can do too. But going public, brings in complete new, different dimensions that did not exist before. Before, you had no obligation to create and show your financial statements. This was something that happened between yourselves, between the board members, between the shareholders. You can do that yourself. Now, you have to ensure that everything is clear and everything is open. Before, you didn't need to talk to the banks necessarily about the side issues you're having. As a public listed company, you have to disclose these things. And if you don't disclose it, it can be held against you. Before, you could say, you know what, that company under that name is still part of the overall. With being a public listed company, you literally have to show the connection between that separate company and the parent company. Or else, that separate company has nothing to do with the parent company. There are many issues of that type of nature that need to be taken into consideration. The amount of profit you give in again, public listed companies, some countries have regulatory restrictions as to what can be given of the profits, what has to go into the reserve. They put these restrictions. If you're a private company, you're free to choose, you know what, this year we're going to give all the profit. Next year we're giving no profit. It's a decision that's happened between the shareholders, and there's an agreement, and end of subject, you move on. But not as a public listed company. You can't do that. If you have decided not to give, if you have a policy of every year doing a 5%, for argument's sake, and 1 year, even though you made impressive profits, you decide, we're not going to give it. You could have shareholders who sue the board members to say, by what means? By what authority do you have to not give us dividends? The company has made a lot of profit. Why are you keeping it? You can, in a private company, decide what is your salary base and structure, etc. As a board member, as a shareholder, as a management team, as an operating person, I don't know, you can give this. As a public listed company, you better justify why you're giving that. So if the company makes, let's say, for argument's sake, $1 million X, X being the currency, and you have 10 board members, and each board member makes 100,000. That's all the profit. You've given it to yourself. In a private, closed company, if the shareholders agree to it, within as family business, I'm talking about as a family, agree to it, fine. C'est la vie. No bad thing has happened. On the other hand, if you're a private, public listed company, you can't do that. Your first obligation is not to yourself as a board member. Your first obligation is to the shareholder. They get paid, not you. Actually, the first obligation is to creditors. You have to pay the creditors first, and they pay the shareholders. You have to understand the nuances that are and the demands that are going to come on to you as a private, as a family business, when you are private versus when you go public. You can be asked in a public setting, if you've gone from private to public, over every decision making that a shareholder has decided he or she does not like. And you better be able to justify it. Because if you don't, there are other ramifications that can come from it. Again, depending on the jurisdiction and depending on the regulatory body, but there could be a lot of ramifications that come from it. And the more restrictive and more stringent the regulatory body is, the more you should be aware and afraid of making any mistake. You do not want to do that. So, is going public the right thing or staying private? There are advantages of going public. If I go public, I need to structure my books. I need to make sure everything is done in the correct way, cross the T's, dot the I's, and all that things. So when I go to ask for loans or I want to expand my business and I have the business cases there, it's fair, but I don't have the money and I need to go and acquire money from lending organizations such as banks or private credit. they will look at me and say, you're open. We get to see these numbers. We get to see these books. We get to see what your organization is. We see your management. We like what you're doing. Here's the money. If you're closed, then they think and go, should I take a bet on them or not? Usually, when you're closed and I don't have access to this information, or you're not giving me enough information, then I want a collateral or a lien against something. Because if tomorrow things go pear-shaped, I have something that says, you know what, that protects me. I've loaned you the money, but this protects me. Is it worth it? The cost of being public is a lot cheaper than the cost of being private in terms of monies, external money, third-party monies that you want to bring on board. Being public, when you do something from the community or from the society, it's looked upon as a much more welcomed. Actually, they expect you to do that, and it's welcomed. When you do it from a private, you're never quite sure what's the motivation. For families who are very obvious and clear, and that we are part of the community and we do things for the community and have a consistent mindset of doing things for the community, being private actually works for them. But if you are one who says, you know what, today there's a problem, let's show we need to fix this by, whitewashing our issues by doing something public. You make people wonder, what's the motivation behind that action that you took? Governments also look positively towards publicly listed companies versus that of private listed companies, simply because they know I have access to information I can see with a public listed company I cannot see with a private business. And if a private business goes pear-shaped, overextend themselves, take loans that they shouldn't have, the business collapses, well, the first thing they're going to go and complain with a cupped hand is to the government. Now, the government doesn't like this thing because it means that you're creating waves in the economy. If you're a public listed company, most likely they will see these waves coming ahead and hopefully curtail it before it hits. In a private where it's opaque and I cannot see, it's all of a sudden wake up one day and go, oh, there you go, there's a problem. Now, I'm not saying that you can't have problems in public listed companies that don't happen overnight, or that the government, the regulatory, take their eye off the ball. These things can happen, but they're less likely to happen when everything is more open and obvious. So even in public listed companies, you can have places where you hide things. And even though it's not necessarily to do with a family business, but family business learn how to do these things from public listed companies in terms of how they get these things done. Case in point was Enron. Enron gave the impression that, as far as the regulators are concerned, this was flying beautifully. It was doing 800 miles an hour. It was great. The company is fantastic. What they didn't tell you is that they were hiding a lot of the problems in SPVs and offshore accounts. Causing where every time they had a problem, they just took that one from off the books and just shoved it into that company. Now, had the regulatory bodies been aware of this, they would have quickly shut that down, but they didn't know. So that's why you have sometimes where even a public listed company can hide these things. But it didn't last long because after that, you saw what happened to Enron. And in family businesses, you'll have the same thing too. Most of the family businesses that started off 150 years ago, 200 years ago, thereabouts, 100 years ago. Today most of them are no longer. And they went from the natural cycle of entrepreneur to a family business, to a public listed company, to eventually to oblivion, and just go through the cycle. The idea is, we think if we go private, so if we go public, I'm protecting my company for the long term. Well, the problems don't go away because you're public. You just add new problems. The old problems haven't gone away, but new problems have started up. the only advantage I can think of in terms of going from private to public is that if any family member who wants to leave can leave when you have a public listing of the company, because and with enough volume, of course. This is very important, because what was before restrictive is now open, and the person can leave, and the business can continue and prosper, because that person might have been an extra weight, and he might have been able to sell his share to a strategic buyer who comes in and actually makes the business that much better. For family businesses, the idea of doing an IPO has two purposes. Less for raising money, although that's part of it. The main thought of family businesses going public is it's a trophy. Look, my business is well, I'm doing well, I've been successful, and now I want to present my baby to the world. There you go. It might not be everything that's, not everything that shines is golden, but that's the mindset that drives this. The second one, which is a frightening thought in family business parlance, is by taking the business from private to public, all of the issues that I could not do before because it's between family members and I was embarrassed by or restricted from, now because it's a public listed company, I can apply those things. And the previous episodes I've talked about is the abuse that happens. And in this case, you could have that type of abuse, because in the past, I might have been embarrassed to want to fire a family member. I might have been embarrassed to want to send off or get rid of a division because I don't like a certain cousin, or I don't like a certain brother, or I don't like a certain uncle, and all those things. But now, as a public listed company, I justify it, get the shareholders to agree, and all of a sudden, it's possible. And they think this is a panacea that actually solves all the problems for the family business. For the family in the family business. In reality, it doesn't. You're just adding new layers of what you really didn't want before. And as far as costs are concerned, when you look at the requirements that are required as a public listed company versus that of a private, it starts to add up over the years. And unless you're going to take that money that you're going to make from the from the listing and utilize it and grow the business significantly, that cost becomes prohibitive sometimes. Now, why do I need to list? I need it because I want to I want to gain new monies and be able to expand my business. That's one of the major reasons why people list their company, because otherwise it becomes harder and harder for me to get the money from the lenders. A lot of businesses, when they do list, don't have that in mind. They don't even have a story to sell you for you to buy their shares. I have seen so many, sadly, companies who have given a story which is completely far away from the reality of what they have. Because they know it's only by selling you the story will you invest in me. And after the thing has come to be, after they've gone public, maybe for a year or two, they fulfill that promise. And then after that, bye. We're on another trajectory altogether. And they never fulfill what they said they're going to fulfill in their perspective. In some cases, the environment has changed. That I understand. In some cases, the management has changed, which is also fine. But in a lot of the cases, it's, I don't care what you think. Even though when you go public, you have a fiduciary duty, a legal duty, a custodial duty, an ethical duty to the shareholder to protect their asset, which you are managing on their behalf. But you don't. Again, this is where the regulatory body comes in, and they're supposed to hold these people to account. Going public is not the pinnacle of your success. I can name you companies that we utilize nearly every day. Some cases every day, I don't know, it depends. And are private. And they are successful, extremely successful. Companies like, for example, in the food industry, Cargill. In the chocolate industry, Mars. They are private companies, owned by families, run by management. And they are not what you call public listed at all. And they're not thinking of going public, at least so far. I'm not thinking of going public because that's not necessarily the pinnacle of what they want. For them, they want to have a successful business, and they want to grow their family business, and they want to keep it within the family. Good. You have then others who, by the nature of the business, necessitate that they need to go public. For example, car companies, because the amount of cash that you need and capital you need to grow that type of business is immense. And no family can start off with that amount of capital required at this day and age. So those are the companies you will see eventually going from private to public, even if they're a family business. Because, case in point is, for example, Ford today. Even Ford is considered by most people in the family business environment, are considered a family business because I think they still own a significant shareholding, and at one point or another they have a say in the management and or manage the board. So you have that. So, how you define a family business, again, would be how you place them. But even they realized, even Mr. Henry Ford realized, I can't keep on doing this. I need new money in to be able to expand and grow and build. And to do that, I need to go public. So going public is not necessarily the pinnacle of your success. But it's a way to help you acquire capital to grow your business. But to grow your business, you need to have a trajectory, you need to have a story, you need to have good management, you need to have everything that is required to be successful. And then being public, getting the access to the cash, capital to be able to grow that business. That should be the focus of why you go from private to public. And nothing else. Because otherwise, as I said, what a lot of family businesses do when they go from private to public is just a way of saying, I have reached the pinnacle. Maybe, maybe not. It's good for the overall environment and economy. The more public companies are there, the better. Because then everyone can partake and participate in the growth story of these public listed companies. That's not a bad thing. Actually, that's a very good thing. But I don't want you to tell me just because you want that to happen, you're going to lower your standards as a regulatory body to allow me to have that exit. Because I will, if I know the story is bad, sadly, this is how we as humans are. I will dump my problems onto you. And that will have a negative effect on the economy. So only those companies that are actually sustainable, creating growth stories, creating new businesses, making other things happen, those are the ones you want to say, you know what, ahlan wa sahlan, let's do an IPO for you. Let's help you move from a private, what you call sector, to a public sector. If I have a government entity that is very successful in what it does, then that's when I want to move from private to public, because I want the public who are users of this service to also be beneficiaries of the monies that this service makes. That's a good thing. Family businesses should be looking at going from private to public if they have a story that they can tell and they have reason to grow, to get access to capital, to grow their business, not to enrich their shareholders. By enriching your shareholder, by selling off, how does the economy benefit from that? I'm taking a private problem and making it a public problem. And I don't want that. No economy should want that. I want to help grow new ideas, new thought processes, new opportunities. And going from private to public can facilitate that. But it should be something where I'm looking at a growth story and not a sell down. We forget that when you're public, this is not money that goes into your pocket. You've just taken on a liability. It's not an asset. Because you now owe the shareholders this money. And you owe them to take care of their money, their asset. Their asset. The company's liability, their asset. You owe them that. You have to take care of it. You have to grow it for them. You have to utilize it for them. You utilize it on their behalf. You make use of it on their behalf. And eventually, you pay it back to them. If you do that for that sake, everyone will be clapping and saying, "Well done. You're exactly what we're looking for." If you don't do that, it will not take very long before people say, "This was the wrong one. Let's sell off and move on to the next one." Don't be that, and don't do that. It's a vehicle like any other vehicle. If used properly, can be very beneficial. And if used wrongly, can turn and bite you. I hope if there are any companies that are looking to do an IPO, you do it for the right reason. You do it because you have a growth story. You do it because you can see where if you can expand with new capital, you can actually add benefit, not just to yourself, but to the environment and the community and the society you're in. And that you do it in a place where the regulatory body understands what you're looking for and helps and supports you and is not passive, but active and goes out of its way to make things easier for you if they see that you're the right candidate, but makes it difficult for you if they see you're the wrong candidate.